afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special business meeting for the Council of the District of Squamish on Monday, July 20th. We are meeting today on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We called today's meeting because our agendas are so full for the rest of the month we couldn't fit this in. So that's why we are meeting on Monday. We just have one item on the agenda, and that is Council's strategic plan update. Of course, we like to do this before we go into the next budget cycle, and especially this year with so many uncertainties created by COVID-19. We thought it would be timely to have this update for the public as well. So without any further explanation, I will turn it over to Ms. Glenday, our CAO.
Thank you very much, Mayor Elliott, Council, and members of the community that are joining us today. We're happy to be
hold
providing...
on, Linda. Oh. I forgot our ministerial order.
Oh, okay.
Also, the little electronic participation blurb. You'd think I would have that dialed by now. So I'll come back to you just a second. We are meeting today electronically, and just go over the rules for council and any public that are listening today. So when a council member disconnects or reconnects, if you could please advise us so that that can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting.
It's frozen again.
Council members are asked to identify themselves when they wish to speak by raising their hand if you're connected by video, or simply saying chair if you're connecting by audio only. With respect to a vote, council members are only required to state a nay vote. Please put your phone or computer on mute unless you are speaking. That goes for staff as well. And council members shall be involved in and participate in the meeting. If you're having technical difficulties, please text the corporate officer. And if we're having technical difficulties on our side, the meeting will be recessed for up to 10 minutes so that we can get everyone reconnected again. Also, pursuant to Ministerial Order M192, we do have to explain to the public why we can't accommodate in-public attendance at this meeting, and also the ways in which the public can stay informed about what we're discussing. So today, because we can't meet physical distancing requirements, we are live streaming this meeting, and a video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on an on-demand basis. So if someone could move that motion. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now I get to hand it over to the CAO. Sorry about that false start. I was so keen to get to our discussion, I forgot all of the formalities. Go ahead, Ms. Glenday.
Thank you very much. Council, this afternoon, first of all, thank you for taking the time on a Monday. Staff are looking forward to presenting an update to you on our, our organizational plan, which is the overarching plan for our operations that you'll see a great update on, and then following that, the update on the specific strategic plan. We're doing a different format this time, so rather than me consolidating everybody's work and presenting, each of the priority areas or organizational plan pillars has a lead and a team, and that lead and team will be presenting their different areas. We'll start with the organizational plan, and staff's preference is to go through all 4 sections before entertaining questions, but I'll defer to you, Mayor Elliott, on how you want to do that.
Okay, unless it's just a question really about clarity, like you really don't understand something, then we'll allow staff to proceed. But yeah, if you need some clarity, then raise your hand and we'll just do those brief questions as we go along.
Okay. So we'll start with the organizational plan and then have discussion and questions and then move into the strategic plan. So at this point, I'll ask Robin Arthur to pull up the presentation. And Robin is also first in terms of our organizational plan pillar on people.
Ms. Arthur's
Yep.
currently wrestling with technology, so stand by.
Yeah, we had a computer problem here just 30 seconds ago. You have to turn it. You can turn it. My camera on? Yeah, I do. Okay. That's okay. Okay. Thank you, Council. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties on our end, and I don't have my camera working, so you'll have to see Linda. Linda, you're still on the screen.
Okay.
So the first part of the, did you want to talk about the organizational plan here, this part, Linda?
Sure. I'll just remind the community that our organizational plan, it looks similar to the strategic plan in terms of format, but really what it does is it focuses, it's our base pillars for operating that transcend council. So it's around our operational work, our service philosophy, our stewardship, and so this is what we call sort of the 80% or the rest of the work that goes on to support delivery of the strategic plan as well as municipal services. And there are 4 pillars of our foundational areas that we want to keep top of mind. And then within those are specific goals year to year. Unlike the strategic plan, some of these goals were only annual, and following this update, and once we get through some of the COVID pressures, we will be refreshing this, and we'll give council that update when that happens. So we'll start with people, which is our first pillar, and I'll hand it over to Robin.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Linda. The first pillar under our organizational plan, of course, is our #1 asset, and that is our people. Strategic goals identified in the organizational plan. There's 3 of them: employee engagement, human resources strategy, health, safety, and wellness. So for employee engagement, we've been really busy despite our COVID. It's actually given us extra opportunity to really focus on employee engagement. In 2019, with our capacity review, part of that was an employment engagement survey that was completed by WMC, and there was some results there that have got us to launch into the next phase of our engagement coming in the fall. Part of what is also coming out of that are what we're calling stay interviews, which are under development to identify gaps where employees are feeling frustrated, and because of that frustration, they're tending to leave. Things such as, working at home and feeling isolated, and our own ability to ensure that people are connected despite where they're situated right now, that they're still feeling like part of a team, and they're not experiencing that frustration. Also, what comes with the stay interviews, which are coming in Q4 in the fall, will be a redevelopment of our, or a revamp of our performance and development reviews. And this is a diagram that talks about engagement, the circle of engagement, and including next up being pulse surveys, which are targeted around COVID specific related issues, such as, like I just said, working from home, and the other aspect of that is redeployment. So we've had an opportunity to engage our staff throughout COVID. Through redeployment opportunities, we've had people working with Mr. Pickett's and picking up new skills. We've had people working with the CAO. We've had people working, in roles that are not typically traditional for what they have right now, and we want some feedback from them on that. And from that, it'll give us some insight into how to retain our staff and how to keep them engaged. Next on the pillar is human resources strategy, and as council's aware, we've completed our compensation review, we've completed our capacity review. Currently, we're almost to the finish line with the strategic workforce plan that's coming to us as CLT next month in a final version. And the one that's at risk right now is the recruitment, retention, and succession. It won't start now until early 2021, just because our HR team have been flat out working with the COVID response. So that's the one that's just a couple of months, but it's not at risk. It's just a couple of months behind, and because we're doing it in-house as opposed to contracting it out. And of course, we've just, council gave us the opportunity to hire a new HR coordinator this year, and that person is focused on health, safety, and wellness. This is something that we're looking to save money and create efficiencies on, taking extra attention with COVID and remote work, check-ins to prevent isolation, moving towards rotating staff through the hall when it gets safe, because some people are finding it a struggle to work at home right now, especially if school changes again. I think people will need to come back to work a little bit. And part of also what she's doing is our core certification, which is one of the main things that they were hired for, which will bring down our ratings experience with WorkSafe and save us money, and that's how this position is being funded. So that is the work that we're currently doing on our people pillar under the org plan.
So effective service has a couple of us presenting, but first up will be Carrie Ng with the TTP project.
Is he unmuted? Carrie, can you hear us? Can you?
The irony is not lost here.
Oh, when technology fails us.
Yeah. Well, Robin, why don't you go down to the climb slides while Carrie tries to reconnect? Oh, back up. Thanks. Okay, so part of effective service are one of our specific goals. So we have an overarching brand for service, delivering outstanding service that permeates our whole organization. But in terms of improving, continual improvement, Carrie will speak to the technology and the business processes specifically. Climb is a program that we started a few years back, and to be candid, it really wasn't even on the side of my desk. It fell off to a certain degree, just with different capacity pressures. And its permeation through the organization has been inconsistent. We do use the language. I think I know the idea of continual improvement does permeate the organization, but the program itself does need some reinvigorating. That has yet to happen. But Robin, if you go to the next slide. As I mentioned, it was led by me, and I underestimated or overestimated my capacity. With COVID, we now have an opportunity to dovetail Climb into our work that's going forward around what did we learn and optimizing our business at the district based on those learnings. And in terms of my capacity being now on track, I've just hired a new research and project coordinator, Keely Kidner, who has hit the ground running and is going to work with me on reinvigorating Climb. So the next slide just shows some of our examples so far that we'll be able to learn from, and where staff pivoted, and we can use examples to demonstrate and close the loop on this is what continual improvement looks like, adapting, making better, what did we learn from it, how can we apply it going forward. So that's Climb, and I'm hoping that Carrie, you might have to come back to Carrie because I still don't see his video or microphone.
Carrie, can you try?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hey,
Can you
we
hear me?
can.
Oh,
You're on.
I am. And Mary, you're so right. The irony was certainly not lost. And I do apologize. So, Robin, if we can go back to that first slide, the effective service. So, thanks everyone. So, effective service on this pillar is we are empowered to have the tools to deliver outstanding service. If we go to the next slide. One of the goals for this particular pillar was to implement modern and connected business systems to improve processes and services through the TTP. And how we're doing this, how this is being achieved is that we're replacing our legacy systems. And these legacy systems and the processes are paper-based, they're manually intensive, and they're reliant on aged software, to say at the very least. And replacing with online services, replacing with new systems. And these are improving efficiencies on tasks such as submitting a timesheet or issuing a PO. And in so doing, these new systems and processes are creating operational capacity within each of the departments. If we go to the next slide. So the TTP, the program currently has one complete project, and we've got two that are in flight, and we've got two that are on deck. We recently completed payroll. That's a migration of 300 staff from paper timesheets into the online system. We recently completed it. Now we're moving into the operational model, and it's increasing efficiency, but again, by replacing paper timesheets with the new system, and it automates the routing of timesheet submission, approval, and payroll processing. Land management, we're on track to launch this in the fall, October, November of 2020. And what are we doing here? We're streamlining the process for business licenses and permits, development, building, and others, into a single system that automates and stores applicant-specific information for fast retrieval, real-time visibility to it, and integrates directly with the new finance system. And then procurement, similar to payroll, we're replacing paper and replacing our paper purchase orders with an online system. The system streamlines and gives real-time visibility on budget availability, spending authority, goods receipt, and invoice payment approvals. Can we go to the next slide? Certainly impacted by COVID, without a doubt, is how do you train, how do you get an organization ready to move from paper timesheets into the new electronic systems when you can't be there in person, when you can't lead a class, or you can't be over somebody's shoulder. So we definitely need to make some changes in terms of how we're going to prepare the organization for the shift. And it also impacted the team. As the implementation team, we are a collaborative, boisterous bunch, and we're always in a room, we're using whiteboards. We couldn't do that anymore. So what shifts and pivots do we need to do? And furthermore, is that each member on the team, on the project teams, they're members of a department, and those departments need all hands on deck as they made the shift from the pre-COVID world to the new COVID world to make sure that the processes they have in place are adjusted to the new systems and the new demands that are placed upon the departments. And as such, because of these constraints that were incurred, we needed to make a change. We need to pivot and reduce the scope of the procurement module, as well as defer the planner module to 2021. Certainly all wasn't lost by no stretch. Go to the next slide. And COVID presented some pretty unique opportunities for us. First and foremost, even though we couldn't be in person, we still trained and we still got the organization ready for the shift from paper to online timesheets. And we did that by creating online tools. We created a website that had videos, it had PDFs, cheat sheets, it had a mirrored practice site. So everyone from the organization was able to do dry runs, be test pilots within the system, do a timesheet, do approval. We also ran a series of webinars, 20 give or take, where people could drop in, we could walk them through the process, and we could address any of their questions as best we could to get them ready to move from paper to online. And I'm happy to report that as of this morning, we might have one or two paper timesheets hanging out there, but for all intents and purposes, we've made the shift. And then furthermore, we've made the pivot as well. Procurement module I talked about, we just didn't have the capacity to do the full-scale implementation, so we scaled back. We've got a 3-team pilot, that's IT, engineering, finance. And what we're doing with that is we're creating a blueprint for the procurement module to get rid of the paper purchase orders. By having these 3 teams as a test pilot, we will have a framework in place by the end of the summer and a blueprint to roll it out to the rest of the organization, time permitting, in 2020, if not in 21. And then furthermore, in terms of a pivot, well, we took advantage of the facility shutdown and seconded some of the resources from the rec crew. And so we went to an RFI because we know we have to replace class. And so we went to RFI, we found some vendors, some really strong ones, and now we're in an RFP. And I'm positive and confident that we will have a new vendor for rec management software come the end of the summer. And most importantly, we've got a ton of lessons, and these lessons will have created an amazing repository. That repository will create revised application technology roadmap. And that roadmap provides just the guideposts for how the program will continue to impact our ability to deliver effective services, not only for the remainder of the year, but going into 21 and then 22. And that's it for that pillar, or for this goal.
Thank you, Carrie. Next up, Robin, is Gary with stewardship.
Okay, he's coming. Okay, yep, Gary's all
There
clear.
we go. Miracles, right? Woo. Robin?
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay. So key progress with respect to the stewardship component to complete or update required infrastructure and facilities asset management plans. We've completed a gap inventory, looking at all the asset management plans that we have and do not have, and we've completed that. Seismic assessment of dikes is complete. Watershed-based ISMPs, or the integrated stormwater management plans for Dartmouth and Howe Sound, are underway and have completed this year, and our storm sewer inventory is underway, so we can start to manage those assets more capably. Next page. This is just the asset gap analysis that we conducted. Interesting only in terms of the orange or the shaded categories of assets. So were the ones where we highlighted we have potentially the highest risks. And one interesting one was the SCADA system, or the automated control and data acquisition system we have for all of our infrastructure around town, and that we really needed to get some work started on that. And we've done that in-house. Okay, Robin, next slide, please. In terms of the COVID impact, hasn't been significant. The work has generally continued. No significant impact, just a general slowing of asset management plans during the sort of reorganization of work. Opportunities that we see, I'll go back. Green Infrastructure Grant Program that's come out as part of there's a new tranche of grant applications we can make in that, and we already have one in for the wastewater treatment plant at around 9 million. So hopefully we'll do well with that, as we have done in the past. The next slide, Robin. At risk, really there is nothing significant in terms of a COVID impact. It's just a general slowing for the updated asset management plan. Nothing really that's noticeable or significant. Robin, I think that may be we're on to Heather now.
She needs, yeah, there she is. All right.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, so Heather Brockstrud, Chief Financial Officer for the public. A key stewardship progress goal is to establish an initial quarterly financial and major project report process for June 30th, and that's the Q2 reporting. So, and as an update, the UBW General Ledger account and transaction flow setup is now complete. All business units are now reporting through UBW, either directly into the system or indirectly through a manual upload. The quarterly financial statements and reports format have now been completed, and budget managers are currently working through their first round of variance reporting for their departments. That ends today. We are on track to present the second quarter financial results at the July 28th Committee of the Whole meeting. Next slide, please. The Stewardship COVID Pivot, Council adopted a bylaw to extend the property tax and utilities payment penalty charges from July 2nd and July 31st to October 1st and December 1st. Next slide, please. As well, the 2020 budget was amended in the spring to reduce the 2020 tax requirement by $800,000. The budget therefore reduced taxes by 0.5% from 2019. And then on deck for the July 28th council meeting is a proposal to consider the deferring of the property tax sale deadline for 1 year. I believe that's the end of mine. Next slide, and on to Linda or Kate.
Yes, that's me. Thank you very much, Council. Key progress, one of our goals was to launch our OCP monitoring program and provide initial reporting, and I'm happy to say that that is complete. Townfolio is the platform that we're using. It can be accessed from our homepage as well as this URL. Robin, next slide. This is just one screenshot of the number of indicators that are themed according to the OCP, of course. There are 5 different areas. Also, the connectedness, I'm reading the word, but it is connected, is our economic development indicator dashboard as well, which is quite robust and there's a little red button. Robin, if you back up, actually, I'll show where it is. On the right, you'll see on the right of the black box there's a red dot. Thank you. And that's where you can link into the economic development dashboard as well, which is quite robust and has been quite successful and used by our local businesses as well as those looking to come here. Back down, Robin, please. So this has been a great project. There are more indicators that need to be included into this community indicator dashboard, and our action going forward now that we have our community climate action plan is to integrate the indicators from that into this reporting tool. Next slide, Robin. The next is an open data program, and that has is well underway as also. We have a project lead working group that's established. It's cross-departmental with economic development, planning, GIS, and the executive sponsor is Natasha Goldbach, our GM of Community Services. So it's a comprehensive group that's leading this data project. There is a policy and governance framework that's being created right now, which has been somewhat delayed by COVID. But the data itself that is available is currently up. If we flip to the next slide, there's a screenshot. So this is the URL, and again, it can be found on our squamish.ca homepage. And this is all of the different data and layers that the public can access. Next slide. As I mentioned, the COVID impact really is just some slowing on policy and governance. The open data program itself is currently available to the public, and it's just a matter now of continual improvement and additional data, and then how we can leverage the data through the organization to help decision-making and further improve the service to the community. Next slide. Building bridges, this is me as well. Next slide, Robin, please. So this picture I love. This is from last summer. A canoe was purchased through the district and RCMP with the Squamish Nation, and this was the canoe blessing ceremony that occurred that many of us were able to, or had the opportunity to participate in. It was a really wonderful day and very symbolic of the relationship that staff and I know council work continually on growing, and frankly, we're quite grateful for the relationship. Formal training is provided to all staff and council. As many of you remember, we've done the Building Bridges workshop, an experiential workshop. We also did a decolonization workshop. The specific plan to action the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we've contracted with Michelle Mahaney Creative, and she will be working with us to formulate a plan that is culturally sensitive and effective to action, those calls to action. And that work has commenced in May. I'm looking forward to that. Next slide. Project collaboration with the Squamish Nation specifically, there have been a number of fabulous projects, both with our engineering and capital work, emergency management program, the Jimmy Just Slough culvert replacement. There's some pictures of that here. The Eagle Viewing, CHM Reserve Dike Master Plan, the Hunayk Park Sea Dike that we're currently working on, emergency management, the Sea to Sky Corridor Multimodal Evacuation Project, mass care planning and training, and then looking ahead, we've got Indigenous cultural safety and humility training for emergency managers and first responders, our flood response plan, and there are other opportunities beyond emergency management and capital projects that we're just starting to dig into around other areas of the services that we and the Squamish Nation provide to our community. So we're very much looking forward to those. Next slide, please, Robin. Other partnerships that we're very proud of throughout the community include Sea to Sky Community Services and School District 48. The Foundry model for the Youth Center was just approved. Arts Council Economic Development has many community partners, including Tourism Squamish and the Chamber of Commerce, among others. Most recently, our COVID redeployment program was an amazing indication of what can be delivered when we collaborate with many of our social service agencies. And then our temporary bridge housing, here is a picture of it being put in place. 35 days, I believe, Gary and the team, Helping Hands, Sea to Sky Community Services, BC Housing, put in temporary housing to help us deal with COVID and displacement of some folks that were in a hotel that was removed for development. Next slide, please, Robin. So these are the opportunities that came out of COVID in terms of building bridges. You know, out of negative situations, often teams and people galvanize, and it certainly was the case here. As I mentioned, our redeployment program, economic development, has pivoted and has done an amazing amount of work to help with the restart efforts in the community. Here for Squamish is the brand of the program that they're working with the Chamber, of course, and Tourism Squamish, and then, of course, our sidewalk and streetscape program, bridge housing, and then an essential services mutual aid agreement. Robin, next slide. And the mutual aid agreement is, just for more detail on that, with the other Sea to Sky municipalities. Should another wave hit, COVID wave, unfortunately, or another emergency issue for essential public services to help one another in terms of staffing and running our essential services. So that is our organizational plan update, and I'll pass it over to you, Mayor Elliott, for any questions.
Thank you. So council, now would be a good time if you have any questions about the organizational update. Councilor Pettengill?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It's always eye-opening. I mean, I know a lot of stuff goes on at the district, but when you start seeing it all listed out, it kind of makes you realize how much stuff is being done every day. So thank you to everyone who does that. I had a question. So on tomorrow's agenda, I think it's New Westminster is asking for support on a policy around collection of data, more specific demographic data. And I'm just wondering if you're having some of those discussions in terms of the open data policy or our broader data collection, if those discussions are already happening, are they part of the open data policy piece, or is that something, if we think is important, we need to consider separately?
Thank you for the question. To the Mayor, I specifically don't have that question. I know that Ms. Mulligan is on the line and is part of that leadership group. She may have an answer. If not, it's something that we can definitely take into advisement.
She's been raised.
Robin's probably going to have to unmute her.
I am here. Everybody can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So as part of the governance development and policy development, the district is actually engaging with a number of different communities, understanding their processes, and this is actually across Canada. So anything that has to do with open data policy, we are striving to incorporate, or governance, we're striving to incorporate into our thought process as we develop this policy. I don't have the specific information for tomorrow's agenda item, but I can take this offline and review that and ensure that the group is considering this as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Anderson? Councillor Anderson, I saw your hand.
He's muted.
You may need to turn off your video, Councillor Anderson, because we're having some connectivity issues.
Yes, I'm.
Could you turn off your video, Councillor Anderson? Thank you. And try again.
Now, my question.
We're not hearing you, Councillor Anderson.
The collaboration on community projects with the Squamish. I have actually turned. Are you able to hear me now, Mayor Elliott?
It's really very choppy and very quiet, so I don't know whether you can call back in or... We'll have to come back to Councillor Anderson, so...
I'll try to do that, unless you hear me now.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Maybe you could try to dial in again. Councillor Race?
Thank you. Through this, Glenda, I guess one of the areas that when we talk about the COVID response and the effect of COVID, and it seems, thankfully, not to have really sort of dynamited our program, but one of the areas that does seem to be really slowed down by it is recreation. And I'm wondering if you can give us any kind of update on how facilities are opening, what might happen coming into the fall when the weather starts turning and we can't do things outside, pool, ice rink, that kind of thing. Thank you.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Race. Since our last update to Council, I know that Recreation has been working very hard to follow that plan that they did provide. At this point, what I would prefer to do is get a more specific update on that information to provide to Council, and we can communicate that to the community, given that our agendas are full until the end of July. I'm confident that Recreation is on track, and barring a shift in the provincial health guidelines, that things will open in the fall, and I would be happy to bring back those specifics to Council. We can find a mechanism if there's not room on an agenda before the end of the month.
Councillor Race, you may have been away for our update on that very topic. So there was a presentation by staff in June that talked about the plan to reopen all of our facilities through the fall. So I can't remember what date it was, but it may have been, if you don't remember it, it's probably when you were away those two weeks. So. Councillor Anderson, I see that you're back. Do you want to try again?
Yes, I'll try for my phone this time, if you may be able to hear me, Mayor Elliott.
Yes, we can hear you clearly now. Thank you.
Very good. My question concerns the item collaborate on community projects, of course, with the Squamish Nation. Specifically, the Sea to Sky Corridor Multimodal Evacuation Project. We discussed this earlier this year, and it was clear at that time that staff saw the document presented, the regional plan, as one that's, quote, in progress,
And I'm aware that our staff member, Megan Latimer, has been fielding information and inquiries from members of, in particular, the marine and rail community. My question is that whether we can entertain discussions with Squamish Nation regarding their Site B, which is Squamish Nation Fee Simple Land, and their companies, Squamish Forestry Limited. Between this company and these sites are virtually all of our barge loading facilities that we may be able to call upon in an emergency situation. So my question is, perhaps we can update that plan or initiate a dialogue with the Squamish Nation on integrating specifically those sites and operations within the emergency evacuation planning. Thank you.
Over to you, Ms. Glende.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. Certainly we will take that information and I will pass it on to Megan Latimer to discuss and definitely consider. Thank you very much. I'm not aware of any further discussions since the plan, Squamish Nation, not to say it hasn't happened, but I will certainly follow up with Megan.
What I can offer is that members of the community have been who taking an interest in the progress of the plan have pointed out in the recent past, over the last 20 years actually, but even more recently, that these facilities have been used in emergency situations, whether roadblocks to the north or to the south. And so this information is, I know Ms. Latimer has taken interest in, but perhaps the next step may be to consider raising it in consultation with Squamish Nation. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks to all the staff for the presentation. It's definitely helpful to have these intermittent updates. My question is around monitoring and evaluation of the plan. So there's a number of these indicators that I would see could potentially have actual monitoring and evaluation indicators to them. So the number of folks who are actually using the open data portal, data to help advise in the first tactic around retention and recruitment strategies, any numbers there around the effectiveness of changes to the retention strategy. And so I'm just curious how staff continue to look at this plan and evaluate it using some of those kind of more numeric data sets if possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mayor Elliott. That's a great question. Is it relates specifically to something like open data? I actually reached out to our GIS team, and it was quite a comprehensive technical answer. And what I did get was some screenshots around like usage that you would see, like someone like viewing, for instance. And so those numbers are definitely tracked, as well as the OCP monitoring dashboard. And that one, for example, we know we need to be more proactive around advertising its use so that there's more uptake. So those certainly are easy because they do have more empirical measures. I can say that where we do use numbers, we do, and in our next update, we will certainly bring them to you. In terms of the recruiting and retention numbers, again, HR has those numbers, and Robin, I don't know if you want to speak to that now or if we just provide more detailed numbers next update.
I don't have those numbers right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally fine. I have them right now, but I do think in a future update would be helpful to kind of see some of those numerical metrics.
Definitely.
Councillor Herford.
And thank you for this update. It was great to see all the progress, and also to be reassured that our plans may have slowed with COVID, but not seem to have skipped the worst of it on this assessment as far as listening to the impacts it's had in other jurisdictions. But of particular interest to me is the TTP project. It's been, I think, a lengthy project is an understatement, and it's had challenges throughout. And I appreciate the progress made recently. And I wonder if we could sort of compare that to progress at other times. Did we feel we were making similar progress before, but due to the technical nature, we got bogged down, and just sort of we could loop back to that and have a little bit more in relation to the overall project. I understand we're doing, we've got some new pieces online, and there's the next sort of pieces of the project are underway, but on this, as that relates to the scope of the overall project, whether that's percentages or just general idea. So I appreciate the work being done. I'm just trying to figure out what that means in the overall potential finish line at some point.
Thank you for the question. I can certainly answer, but I'd rather have our house expert, Mr. Egan, do that. And I can jump in if necessary.
Thanks, Linda. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thanks, and through the mayor. I think I just need a bit of clarification in terms of what you're asking. Are you looking for how we're doing from a percentage perspective for the overall program from the start of it, from say 2016, 2017? Just to get a general sense in terms of, to your point, is how far along are we at, and at what point will it actually be at that particular finish line?
Yeah, my question was intentionally open to see where how you'd like to package that, and how you'd like to compare maybe our progress in the last 12 months to the 12 months prior, or otherwise. And I know it's the project's very technical in nature, and I don't understand necessarily the mechanics of each of the moves. So maybe just a little more depth and how the progress we've done so far fits in the overall scheme. However you'd like to address that best.
Okay. Yeah. No. Thanks for the clarification on that one, and through the mayor. Without giving a percentage, what I'm most confident about and what I'm most positive about is that the program itself just had a digital foundation that needed to be done, and that digital foundation really was about the finance system. Because the finance system connects to, for all intents and purposes, everything. So as we get into land management, as we get into recreation management, as we get into asset management eventually, and even as we go through other services such as, say, complaints, for example, all of that will tie back into the finance system. So without the finance system, we don't really have that bedrock. So I would suggest, and I'm not going to put a percentage number to it, but I would suggest that we're there from a foundational perspective. Payroll was the biggest one. Payroll represents the largest operating expense, I believe, within the organization, and it is the one project, one of the few projects that impacts the entire organization, because ultimately we are changing how we're paying individuals and how they're spending their time. Now that we're there, and we've got the lessons learned, and that's just absolutely critical, that the team, finance, IT, the organization, has increasing comfort, confidence, capability within UBW as a finance platform. So now, as Heather had alluded to earlier, we have variance reporting. So we have visibility into the overall financial transaction. All that to be said from a program perspective. And to answer your question, the foundation is now there. We never had that. And so with the foundation, we have the ability to move forward with velocity on land management, with velocity on recreation management. So I'm confident, as per the discussions we had earlier last year, that we will get that finish line because that foundation is now in place. We've got the lessons learned, and so we can start integrating the services into that financial system. So I don't know if I've answered your question as directly as I'd hoped, but I'm confident, I'm very positive that we have the foundation in place. That foundation in place to allow us to become truly a digital-first organization.
Go ahead, Councillor Everett.
Yes, thank you. That really helps, and I think in your presentation, it showed that we got that project done, but I don't think I think that bit that it was sort of getting over a hump was sort of lost in there. So thank you very much, and yeah, that's a fair answer.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions on the operating plan so that we can move on to the strategic plan update? Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Council. Moving on to the strategic plan. This is a screenshot of our one-page plan. And to kick us off is Mr. Ian Pickett, our new Manager of Sustainability and Climate Change.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thumbs up. Great. So for key progress, the Community Climate Action Plan, or CCAP, is complete. The plan includes both corporate and community emissions. We have a single-use items reduction bylaw toward our goal of reducing landfill waste. It was supposed to be the single-use plastic reduction bylaw, but it covers more than just plastics. So we were going for the acronym SUPER bylaw, but it is the sewer bylaw. We are tackling single occupancy vehicle use in many forms, including transit, urban form, local jobs, and active transportation. These are covered in Big Move 2 of the CCAP. We are going to be taking a new path on mode share monitoring. Our plan is to use baseline data from the census, and then when we do the transportation plan, we will use that information to refine the census data. And then when we get new census data in 2021, we can compare it to the baseline. Next slide, please. So from some risks, COVID, as you are well aware, has hit transit quite hard. It has delayed expansion. It's also forced us to discourage use for a time. Some people worry that we might lose some ridership permanently from that. Single-use items obviously could not be enforced. We could not enforce the waste bylaw for some time. Some opportunities, higher levels of government are offering a lot of stimulus funding, and we'll try to use this funding to also co-achieve climate goals. So a lot of opportunities there. And also more broadly, there's been some pretty significant societal shifts, trends toward much more remote working, less consumption, less travel, etc. Next slide, please. One item at risks, our per capita waste target is 300 kilograms per person per year. We have had a lot of trouble getting going on this. The sewer bylaw took a substantial amount of time to get through, and then we were hit by the pandemic shortly after. And now we have unfortunately lost our outreach coordinator. Therefore, we've never had consistent ongoing outreach related to this. To mitigate this, we are aggressively moving forward and going to hire an outreach coordinator who can focus on engagement as soon as possible. We are also going to work to make this position permanent. We have materials created by our previous excellent outreach coordinator ready to go. And we'll also work toward construction and waste separation, potentially in partnership with GF. Thank you very much, and I believe it's over to Gary or back to Liz.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In terms of the housing affordability and diversity, key progress this year has been the perpetually affordable housing policy. It took a while, but we got there early on in the year. We're continuing to work with Sea to Sky Community Services on the Buckley affordable rental housing project over by the skate park. We're just waiting on final project commitment from BC Housing still. And we've managed to make some progress in terms of hiring consultants and getting a workshop with council just last week, as you probably remember, on the affordable housing organisation. So that work is ongoing and active this year. One of the other opportunities we took was the Bridge to Housing project in Point Eyot Park. That really just happened upon us, but we made the best of what we could, and that project's been a real success for us in terms of affordable housing. On to the next slide, please. In terms of the COVID impact, the housing entity or the housing organisation, that's been delayed somewhat in terms of issuing the RFP and getting that started, but it has started. The partnering agreement, there's been no significant impact. We just need to close in on that. That was discussed briefly last week. The ownership program that is part of the strat plan is going to be effective and will be significantly delayed. It's at risk because largely we do have to get the organisation or the agency in place before we can do that. And if those precursors have been delayed, then obviously that part of the strat plan is also going to be delayed. So that is at risk. On the flip side, I think the Bridge to Housing has been a remarkable opportunity that we took advantage of as part of the COVID pandemic. The resources and funding were provided very quickly, and we executed very quickly. Next slide, please. So in terms of at-risk elements, I briefly touched on them. The Buckley housing project is ongoing. I say that's not at risk, we're just waiting on BC Housing to get that in place. In terms of the remaining 49 units between Buckley and the 125, we're exploring opportunities with BC Housing about another project, and we'll see where that lands. The partner agreement housing entity, the organization, those are delayed slightly by COVID, but not significantly. Those aren't an undue concern. But again, the ownership program, unless we're able to find some significant new capacity, time and staff resources and advance that in parallel with the organizational stuff, I say that is at risk. On to the next slide. Oh, that might be it. Oh, again, this is just we discussed this and it came up briefly at the housing workshop last week. Trying to think about housing in terms of this wheel rather than the linear spectrum that we've seen before, and think about housing in a slightly different way. We've certainly accepted and adopted this in the way that we're looking at housing development and housing program support. On to the next slide, and I think that might be, we're on to Kate.
Everybody, I'm Kate Mulligan, Economic Development Officer for the District of Squamish. I'm going to update you on the economy and local jobs pillar. To go to the next slide. So to date, we have actioned, I would say, 6 major milestone projects. One of recent endorsement by Council, which is the Economic Development Roadmap and Action Plan, with reference to emerging themes or areas for growth. In particular, the action plan outlines how the Squamish can actually position itself to grow and attract increased employment in the green economy and outdoor recreation. In addition, the district internal staff with planning, economic development, and the GIS department undertook a project to inventory all employment space and industrial land within the district's boundaries. And that fed into the development of an employment-based demand model, which was developed by BP Rollo and Associates. And staff are using the inventory and developed model to help support the 2020 zoning bylaw update, as well as help with business development efforts as it relates to land and space throughout the district. The district recently entered into a partnership in early 2020 with Spring Activator and Discovery Inc., and that was to bring a series of programming for our local business community. And the first of that training has launched. It's called the Business Resiliency Program. And Spring Activator is offering this programming for free to all local Squamish businesses and entrepreneurs. And the program has been designed by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. And the purpose of the program is to help businesses navigate the changing landscape and these challenging times associated with COVID. And this is through a series of online training, as well as a support community for entrepreneurs. In addition, the district, in partnership with Tourism Squamish and the Squamish Chamber of Commerce, completed a tourism impact study. That study was presented to Council earlier this year, and subsequent work is being completed at this time, which will provide, beyond the tourism impact, considerations for future sustainable tourism development. This will be brought to Council in the fall of this year. And the district has adopted a new governance process or structure for economic development. This includes the formation of 2 groups, one of which has held its inaugural meeting, which is the Economic Leadership Team, comprised of 10 individuals that provide expertise on the strategic implementation of economic development for the district. Right now, in progress, we are just confirming all of the partner forum participants, and those will be the 2 groups that will help us steer our direction within economic development forward. And then finally, we also completed a review of impact measurements by sector, and we now have methodology or approach and methodology that can be used to measure various sectors within Squamish, and that will be shared with Council in the fall for information. Next slide, please. Moving forward, under the 2 thematic areas of firm and job growth within Council's strategic plan is the implementation of the emerging sector roadmap, which contains many components as we move forward in 2020 and throughout 2021. And that is to build ecosystems and clusters around our emerging thematic areas, and as well attract new firms and employment growth throughout the district. We also are planning to continue with the completion of economic impact studies, 2 of which were put on hold due to COVID. One focused on agri-foods and one focused on forestry and wood products. We do have 2 more slated, one focused on high technology and measuring creative industries. We are also focused on the increase of terrestrial and marine employment space as per the strategic plan. We intend to increase the value or continuously increase the value of our new evergreen tool, which is the employment space demand model, by integrating the work that's being done with the TTP in terms of systems such as the development permit systems and business licensing, so that we can have a more robust data set available and to be able to make this model more sophisticated as time goes on, and also keep the inventory with relation to employment space up to date and evergreen. We are also working to maximize the value of existing employment space, and that's by supporting investment decisions related to development, infrastructure, and servicing on strategic parcels. So that really involves working with the business community, working with the development community, and working with government at all levels to help ensure that the foundation is set so that we maximize the value of our limited employment space. And next slide. And finally, we were faced, obviously, with some impacts related to COVID-19, much like all other departments. And one of the key impacts was, of course, we did add a bit of work to our plate, but really the challenge has been in engagement. Engagement levels are challenging at the best of times with respect to getting feedback on our plans and moving forward, because our local business community is busy doing business. And that remains true through COVID. And there also has been quite a bit of survey fatigue as a result of COVID-19. So our communication approach has shifted. We're a little bit more flexible now. For instance, we just completed our initial round of focus groups relating to space needs throughout the district. And we are actually following up and doing one-on-one interviews because of the challenge in terms of engaging with various stakeholders. We are also reaching out to partners to work effectively with them in terms of engaging with their members. External market factors, we don't have control over external market factors, and that obviously has an impact on the various sectors that are here and represented in Squamish. And our goal is to continue to diversify our economy and ensure that we're not reliant solely on one sector. So that speaks very much to the emerging sector roadmap. an action plan in an effort to further diversify our ecosystem. And then as an opportunity, much like what we've heard from other departments, we're very much focused right now on provincial and federal government stimulus and how that can help as a catalyst to meet some of our economic development and other priorities and goals. So one of the approaches that we're taking is looking for areas where the OCP and the strategic plan and our work align with our other provincial and federal counterparts in order to fulfill on receiving stimulus funding. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonas Velnishkis, the Director of Community Planning, and I am presenting the Neighborhood Connectivity and Public Spaces pillar today. I'm not sure if you can see me, but you can see the slides, which is more important. So here are just the 5 goals from the strategic plan. And, just a quick overview. Those were 2 neighborhood plans in existing neighborhoods, neighborhood parks and open spaces in 5 residential neighborhoods, as well as downtown and marine waterfront. Progressed to 3 shovel-ready critical district facilities, and better utilization of our public spaces and open space. Next slide, please. So some of the key progress. One of the new district parks at the University Heights is almost complete. The developer is just finishing some of the landscaping. As you can see, there's a new pump track in there and a new playground. The real estate and facilities master plan is complete, as well as the arts, culture, and heritage strategy and the youth strategy. The 2 things that are making lots of progress at this point is the fire hall in Gottlieb is underway, as well as the Loggers East neighborhood plan, which is one of the 2 neighborhood plans scheduled for completion in this council's term. Next slide, please. So in terms of neighborhood planning for 2 residential neighborhoods, we have Loggers East, which has been impacted by COVID-19. Really anything that has a public participation in componented will be impacted. We are planning the second round of consultation to take place after the first reading, and that is scheduled for September at this point. But we've done good progress on developing a land use plan, and we're currently working on land use policies to go along with it. The land use plan took a little longer because we wanted to make sure that we've got the employment lands and space model completed so that the results could be incorporated. And of course, there's the stormwater management process that's ongoing parallel to the land use planning in that area, and that's something that we are still waiting for final results. The Garibaldi Estates neighborhood plan is, Garibaldi Estates is the second area that is scheduled for neighborhood planning once the Loggers East neighborhood plan is adopted, and that's scheduled for 2021. So in terms of hurdles for Loggers East, as I said, COVID has had an impact, but it's not very significant at this point. Continued funding for the plan is in place right now, and we should be able to finish the plan based on those funds, as well as stormwater planning for the area, which hasn't completed yet, but we have pretty good direction on how to move forward with the land use plan. For the Garibaldi Estates neighborhood plan, the budget will be an issue, as well as making sure that the Loggers East plan state is completed on time. So as long as it's completed this year, we should be able to move to Garibaldi Estates neighborhood plan in the next year. Next slide, please. In terms of 3 shovel-ready or beyond stage priority district facilities, we've got the Valley Cliff Fire Hall redevelopment. So the tendering is expected in September. COVID hasn't really had a negative impact on that project, And the other two projects, which is the public works site redevelopment and the tankless fire hall, the preliminary designs are scheduled for next year. So none of those actions have yet been taken. Next slide. In terms of publicly accessible parks and gathering spaces, we do have 5 park projects underway. So we have the Dental Park, which is a district-led project. This project hasn't been impacted by COVID. It's somewhat tied to the affordable housing project that's happening next to it. The design has taken a little longer than initially expected, but the overall delivery of the project is still scheduled for this year. So at this point, it's looking like end of November would be the completion date, with clearing activities starting in September. And then the rest of these parks, so we have the Oceanfront Park, Waterfront Park, Garibaldi Springs Park. These are all development-driven projects. So developers have to deliver these parks as part of their agreement with the district. And I guess COVID would, it still is unknown what impact COVID will have on the housing market, and so that could have an impact on all of these projects in terms of timing and delivery. The University Heights Park is still under construction, but we have bonding in place, so it is unlikely that it will get affected by COVID-19. However, the rest of these parks' timing is strictly tied to housing units getting to occupancy on some phase of that development. For Oceanfront, it's the beginning of the first housing unit. For Garibaldi Springs and Waterfront Park, it's more tied to the certain phases in that project. And so those phases get affected by the volatility in the housing market, then it may have an impact on parks as well. Next slide, please. In terms of year-round utilization of our multi-purpose space and public spaces, we have some successes. So I'll let Tim speak to Arts, Recreation, and Youth Hub. In terms of the first two items, they have been impacted by competing priorities, and that's baseline utilization of our open spaces and park spaces, as well as public space user experience. And now I'll hand it over to Tim.
Thank you. Tim Hoskin, Director of Special Projects and Initiatives. The Arts, Culture, and Heritage Strategy, although there's been some low uptake from the community on providing feedback, we are moving forward with some key stakeholder one-on-ones. When it comes to the Recreation Optimization Plan, a lot of progress with COVID. We are seeing some challenges with partner capacity. For example, that would be Vancouver Coastal Health, of course, has their hands full, and they're one of our key partners on many of our facility ideas at this point. So there is, with COVID though, some opportunity. As we know, there's been some recreation infrastructure funding announced. We will be in front of council in September with a recommendation on how to move forward for a deadline on October 1st. The Youth Hub in strategy, yeah, great news. It's been almost a month now, but Squamish was chosen as a foundry community, along with some funding to support that. What a foundry is, for those watching, is a model being implemented across the province that integrates clinical support and youth centers. So youth teams can get mental health, sexual health, physical health support in the same place that they go to hang out. So very exciting. And along with the youth strategy, we're working with our community partners, Sea to Sky Community Services, to align the youth programming along with the youth strategy. So their staff have some great ideas and uptake to make these changes. And with COVID, there's of course been some challenges, and we've created with them a virtual youth hub, and they have created some virtual youth programming as well as delivering programs in parks and other places where social distancing requirements can be met. So that's it. I guess back over to Linda.
Ms. Glenday, any closing thoughts before I turn it over to council?
No, I would just like to thank all of our staff who has worked really well with me in terms of getting this update together, not to mention the actual work behind it all. So thanks to everyone that presented, and we look forward to your questions.
All right, Council Herford.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone involved in those presentations and for doing the work that keeps us on track to hopefully get to where we'd like to be on all of our strategic goals. My question is around the, I guess it's neighborhood connectivity, utilization of space, creation of parks. And that list that was provided, and it was noted was development driven. And that's great that we're finding those opportunities and they're being followed through on. And I look forward to visiting all those when they're operational. But I was thinking back to some of the conversations we had that have come through council over the last months, and I got to thinking that there was an area where in one of our conversations we had a section of the neighborhood, and in this case it was Brackendale, expressed that there was an unused lane that they strongly felt didn't want to be used as a lane. And it sort of jumped up at me as potentially an opportunity to create a park. And I just wondered where these opportunities exist, and where we're potentially in other areas, and what thought is given to them, and what mechanisms we have to identify and or execute that. And maybe the idea I just said is a bad idea. So, but I'm just curious where the radar is for that, for those opportunities outside of development-driven opportunities.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. I will defer to our planning experts. I see Gary's up on the screen.
Defer to Gary.
Oh, or Yonan. Wait a second, what just happened there?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're up on top there, so.
Am I?
Yeah.
Hard to tell. Okay. So we do capture those opportunities. Brackendale is a good example, but we've also had, park spaces that have been dedicated as that, but have no improvements in it. So we are capturing as these come up. And then it becomes really, when we have budget, if it's something small, and if we don't, then it becomes a budget discussion for the following year.
Does that help, Councillor Herford?
It does, and I'm curious for those opportunities. The development, obviously, development drives all sorts of change in our community, and I just want to make sure, as with most things, that we're in the driver's seat with these park projects, and that lane between Birkin and Hope, I think, is a really strip park. So I'd love to see some concepts, whether it's that specific one or concepts like this, brought forward, where we seem to have an opportunity in it. It's sort of how the neighborhood using a space, and using this one as an example, that we can legitimize it and protect, and hopefully enhance the usage of the spaces. So I know there's opportunities out there.
All right, thank you. I have Councillor Race and Councillor Stoner, and I'm just going to ask our council to try and keep your questions tight and to the point so that we can get through more of them within the time we've allotted. That'd be great.
Thank you. And this, I'll just follow up to Councillor Herford's point. because I recall that discussion, and there's actually, when I looked at the map, there's several of these unused lanes which could be considered, not just the one we were dealing with that evening. And there would not be, I don't believe, acquisition costs, because I think they're all road right-of-ways, and the question is more neighborhood consultation, I think. So I think there are opportunities there, because certainly when you have new development, you have opportunities to get park space in the course of that development. But we had limited opportunity in existing neighborhoods to go back and re-engineer the neighborhood. So I wouldn't want to lose, at least considering this, and we'll just see where that would go. Thank you.
Mr. Vilnius?
If I may just add to what I said, part of the plan is to collect the information that we have on RDF in terms of where these open spaces and parks are, and from there we will be able to have a better idea, you know, what areas are really deficient in neighborhood parks, and likely focus the resources first in those areas. But it's part of the plan to identify, you know, where all of our open spaces are, and that will allow us better prioritization of district-led projects.
Any follow-up, Councillor Race, or are you good? All right, I've got Councillor Stoner, and then Councillor Pettengill, and Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have a few questions. The first is around the goal for increased year-round utilization of our multi-purpose spaces. And appreciate that we haven't gotten around to actually establishing the baseline survey yet. However, COVID has really changed how we deliver our recreation services, and we have started to use many neighborhood parks for new reasons, and I'm just curious if staff are capturing that.
Meryl, just for clarification, are you referring to capturing the data, Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, a combination of how many people are attending those programs, how often we're using that as programmable space. So yeah, I have a data capture.
Thank you. I do know that our parks ambassadors were taking advantage of being out in our parks and open spaces to collect data. In terms of further programming, I know Devin Guest is on the line. I'm not sure, Devin, if you have additional information, if the capacity has been there to take these kind of measurements at this time.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Yes, staff have been tracking, kind of prioritizing metrics within number of program participants, as well as number of bubbles or families participating in parks when they go around and do their check-ins.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I do think that is a useful step in the interim to be able to kind of track how we've been changing and kind of on that continuous improvement piece, what has been working and what hasn't in terms of delivery of programs in different spaces. So it's an interesting piece. My second question is around, again, kind of data related in ECDEV. So increase the number of local jobs per capita year over year by 2022. And put a fair bit of time and energy and effort into making these measurable goals. And I'm just curious if we have, again, any sort of sense of where we were in 2018 and where we are here today in 2020, of if that number is increasing or decreasing.
Hi there. Yes, we actually are tracking. We have a few different areas that we can track, some within our own data and some through third-party data. We use MZ Analyst data, which is based on Statistics Canada data, and that provides estimates and forecasts into the future. So we are tracking the number of local jobs, and it is rising. Now, those are large metrics where the attribution of those metrics extends beyond economic development activities, but it is a community indicator. It's also an indicator that we use in our economic development dashboard. So if you go there and we report on the number of local jobs and also priority sector firms. So we are seeing increases. The business license data is suggesting, though, that the number of new firms has softened from last year to 2018 to 2019. Sorry.
Great. I think that sort of information is super useful, and if we are collecting it, again, in future reports, it'd be helpful to kind of have those indicators tied to the reporting. And then my last question is around the greenhouse gas emissions piece, and I did note in the community performance indicators dashboard that our corporate greenhouse gas emissions have increased between 2018 and 2019. And I'm just curious if we have dug into that at all. Obviously, I think we're still purchasing carbon offsets to become carbon neutral, but that's definitely not the direction we want to be seeing that number go. So curious if we have any insights there.
Mayor Elliott, Ian Pickett has been digging into this quite thoroughly, and I'll pass it over to him.
Yes, thanks, Ms. Stoner. Excellent question and a noteworthy observation. One small clarification or correction that is I'm actually just in the process of verifying this with our greenhouse gas auditors. Is I believe there was a small error in our greenhouse gases for 2019. I believe they associated some of the private activities with GFL with the corporate emissions. So there's still, I'm very confident I'm correct, but I'm not sure. The new numbers make a lot more sense in relation to what the old ones were, and match up with the different cells that they provided us with. So we believe that the increase in emissions is about 3% over last year. What I've noticed looking at the data, we get really good at CAREP reporting greenhouse gas software data. We have a very modest reduction in emissions associated with buildings, largely due to the work that Ms. Say and others are doing in infrastructure. But there was an increase in emissions associated with fleet. One thing we believe has happened is that 2019 was a colder year than 2018, so there were more large snowfall events, and there was also more ice control. Do encourage, definitely completely agree that the numbers need to be trending downward and steeply. However, there are some interannual variations, largely related to the temperature, and 2019 was a cold year.
All right. I'm just going to ask Councillor French to take over chairing the meeting for a minute. I have to refill my water. And I've got Councillor Pettengill and then Councillor Anderson on the speakers list.
Very good, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Pettengill. Oh, thank you. Maybe for Mr. Pickett, while he's still on, I think we had a bit of a conversation about the 300 kilograms per person or per capita waste target, which seems very high, and I believe the discussion was that actually when you include all construction waste and then you average it out per capita, that's why the individual waste levels are so high. And I want to check if I'm correct in that understanding, and then, well, I'll start with that.
Yes, I believe you are correct in that. A large proportion of that is related to construction waste, and that was responsible for most of the increase from 2018 to 2019.
Okay, thank you. So I think we did have the discussion about whether we separate those numbers out a little bit, and I think there may be, it's still worth considering some value, because I think as individuals, we're not at that 300 kilogram level, I don't believe generally, and so it makes us, I think there's value in recognizing where we are having success, and maybe splitting that metric out and that target out would be useful. Thank you. On the arts, culture, and heritage strategy, I wonder if Mr. Hoskins can just clarify the low uptake on feedback, because my understanding is that we had a lot of good engagement feedback on the strategy. I believe it's on the agenda for approval tomorrow. So just not clear, and maybe I missed it in the presentation, what the low uptake on feedback was in relation to.
Ms. Glende.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. Just behind the scenes in talking to staff, I'd ask that Devin Guest answer the question. She's so much more involved in the strategy than Mr. Hoskins. No disrespect to Tim, of course.
Ms. Guest.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I needed to be promoted. Yes, we have seen a low uptick, and as economic development also has experienced, I think it's part of community fatigue during COVID, and I also think we were very successful in our initial community engagement, receiving upwards of 900 survey responses, which is not typical, I would say, for a district survey. So kind of comparing anything to that initial 900, it is a bit disappointing. But we have continued to push, and also we have reached out with some key stakeholders to ensure that they are informed and tucked in, and if they have any questions to what has been released to the public, that we can continue our solid working relationship that has emerged from this strategy process.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is just around the affordable housing and that whole pillar of our strategic plan. A lot of the goals and the discussion was in a pre-COVID context. So I just want to confirm and touch base that we are being very open and aware to adapting sort of in the decline idea, what the different opportunities are as the rental market changes and so on. Just making sure that we are ready to adapt and adjust and taking care of those new opportunities. And I don't know if staff has any comments, and maybe things just really haven't shifted, or maybe they have.
Well, I guess I'm not sure about what shift or shifts you're referring to, but are we going to be flexible and open to new ideas? Yes. It may be too soon to actually know if something fundamental has shifted in the local market. Plus our data needs to catch up. But yeah, will we be flexible, and will we chase down opportunities? Absolutely.
Okay, I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor French, for taking over for me. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. This question might be addressed to our planning director concerning neighborhood plans. In the strategic plan tracker that's been released to the public, this topic is highlighted as, to quote, Garibaldi Estates or other neighborhood plan. My question is, what criteria, or can you describe the criteria or considerations for selecting priority areas for neighborhood planning processes? I imagine that the areas are inevitably going to be quite varied, but can you account or speak briefly to the criteria or considerations you're making in selecting in the next area or the one after? Thank you.
So we did establish a list that is somewhat based on priority in the official community plan back in 2017. And Garibaldi Estates, there wasn't a quantitative analysis done, it's more qualitative, but it was really based on the interest in rezonings in the area, as well as parcel size that led Garibaldi Estates to be one of the top priorities. So if we don't have a neighborhood plan in place, we will have to entertain rezoning applications. And so in an area where you have lots of interest in development, that could lead to some unintended impacts for the overall growth of the area. And that was the main criteria really for selecting what was the infill development potential of that area combined with interest in development applications. So for instance, Garibaldi Estates, we are now communicating to applicants that we really need a neighborhood plan in place first before any rezoning can be entertained.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Herford, and then Councillor French.
Thank you. While we're talking neighborhood plans, I thought the Loggers East plan, I think, took longer than is taking longer than everyone anticipated, even prior to COVID. And I'm wondering, if there are lessons there, whether it's setting out, whether it's scope related or I don't know, whatever lessons can be learned there to be applied to these new ones, so we have a tighter time frame to work in, so that all parties, the district included, understand where sort of when to expect some the output of the work.
Yes, very good question. There's definitely lessons learned from the Loggers East area. The Loggers East area, I think we didn't budget enough time for the background analysis that has to be done on the riparian connections in the area and the steep slopes. So in that sense, the Loggers East is perhaps a little bit unique compared to the Garibaldi estate. But I think the big learning is to budget more time for that background study to be completed, vetted by district staff, because normally they'll have to go through a few rounds of review before we can put them into the policy-making process.
Go ahead, Councillor Ford.
So with that steep slope piece, as an example, is there work we can do on that specific policy that will help us move through other areas affected by that in a more efficient way? So specifically one specific, is that a learning, and is that something that's coming, or sort of pick up on something that happening?
Definitely. So we are, the reason why it probably took a little longer is because we don't have much policies around steep slopes. For next year, we are planning to start a steep slope development permit area project. So this year we're doing wildfire development permit area as a policy project, and once we're done that, the next step will be a steep slopes development permit area, which will, make those standards easier for us to incorporate into land use planning, because they will be all laid out in terms of what slopes are acceptable and so forth.
Thank you.
Councillor French. And then
Thank you.
Then I'm going to go to myself, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Reyes.
I too am wondering about neighborhood plans. I'm seeing lots of wording that's suggesting Garibaldi Estates is the next. We'll get a neighborhood plan, but then I've also seen some wording that has me doubting that somewhat. So I'm just looking for confirmation that the next neighborhood plan for sure is Garibaldi Estates.
So at the end of the day, the council will have to approve the next neighborhood plan and where we focus. But from a staff perspective, at the top of the list right now is the Garibaldi Estate. In terms of district-driven neighborhood plans, and these are what we're targeting are existing neighborhoods. So, we might get an application from a developer in a new area where there's a requirement for a sub-area plan, and that would be a slightly different project. So it wouldn't be district-led. It would be something that district is part of in every step, but we would be working with the landowner on the other side.
Okay, and does staff have, has staff identified the next existing neighborhood that should get a neighborhood plan, or is that yet to be determined in consultation with council?
Well, in our priority list, from a staff perspective, would be Garibaldi Estates, the next existing neighborhood.
After Garibaldi Estates.
There is a list in the OCP.
I can't recall
I'll find it
off the top of my head, that list, but it might be Dental or North Yards.
Very good. I'll find it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Valencias, while you're still on the line, did you say you won't accept any rezonings in the estates until we have a neighborhood plan? Or if people want to subdivide their lot, or like, what are we talking about here?
So maybe I should correct myself. No, it's not that we won't accept any. And what we're communicating is that it would be one of the biggest issues for staff in their review would be the lack of a neighborhood plan when it comes to a recommendation how to proceed on a rezoning. If somebody applied for a subdivision or a development permit, of course, that a permitting regulated process, you wouldn't have, the district wouldn't have that discretion. At the end of the day, it would be council's call whether to, you know, give reading to a rezoning application.
Okay, thank you. My other question is sort of maybe crosses both the strategic and operational together, Ms. Glenday, and that is around the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we start to incorporate that not only into the operations of the district, but also in how we recruit members to our external committees, and make sure that our engagement practices are actually reaching a broad cross-section of our community. And I'm wondering if, I know that's not technically in our strategic plan, to me it fits somewhere under that community connectivity piece, because obviously we want the district to represent the folks that we speak for. So I'm wondering if you can speak to where that might fit and how council might take that forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mayor Elliott. Certainly we have been thinking about this in light of what's going on in the broader community outside of Squamish and here. It's a good point that, you know, around the building bridges and that community connectiveness under the organizational plan, that it would be a good fit there. Certainly, you know, we're an equal opportunity employer, and but we also recognize that there's a lot of proactivity that needs to happen to be fully diverse and inclusive, and as it relates to engagement and council committees, et cetera, or other committees that we have. So I see it as a hybrid. I know that our HR director is putting in place a staff committee on equity and inclusion and diversity, but that's one small step. In terms of assisting council and going further out into the community around engaging with a more diverse community and making it a truly robust program, I would recommend that staff consider further what that looks like, and if we need to bring that back to budget for 2021, that we could do that. And certainly that wouldn't stop us now from working on what we can within the capacity that we have.
Okay, so let me think about that for a minute, if I can maybe make a resolution to that effect. My last question is around, obviously, staff have started to think about the 2021 budget. I mean, that's why we're doing this update today. How would you characterize right now what you're thinking about in terms of the budget? Obviously, we're still waiting for our numbers on how many people will pay their taxes this year. I think it's going to be challenging, but I'm curious about where staff are focused on in terms of building this budget for 2021.
Mm-hmm. At this point, staff don't have a formal position. I can tell you from the CAO and in talking to Heather Buxrud, our Chief Financial Officer, we are very alive to the likely possibility of being conservative. You know, we can't see into the future, but we can certainly speculate on the economic impacts, potential recession. So I would say that we always work to come in at a very reasonable property tax revenue requisition. And that, of course, would be no different. I think this year where it will be different is what impacts have we seen in revenue and what major pivots do we need to take? And we don't have those answers yet, but we're certainly going into the budget with that lens. It's not going to be a regular budget year, that's for sure. In terms of how we address it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, fair, thank you. I've got Councillor Race and then Councillor Herford.
Thank you. And it's back to Mr. Belanishkas on neighborhood plans again. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is really, is it possible to have two of these going on at the same time? And for example, I believe that Loggers East and Garibaldi Estates, if it goes ahead, are district funded. So apart from budget considerations, if a developer came along and there's a couple of these requirements out there and also wanted to have a neighborhood plan, is it necessary to wait for one of the others? Can one go in front of the other? Can they both happen at the same time? What is our capacity for that?
Very good question. I think that in order to get all the neighborhood plans done and also to be able to accommodate growth in the areas where growth is appropriate, we will have to entertain both at the same time in some years. So our expectation is that with some of these landowner-driven sub-area plans, a lot of the work is going to have to be done by the applicants, background studies and such. And there will be still significant staff resources needed to review all that and coordinate it and direct it. But our expectation is that we will have to accommodate both at the same time, and we will likely have to staff up during those times. And it's quite likely that the way we would approach it is having the developer pay for a staff person on contract working on their application with them.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Herford?
Thank you. When we were speaking about the housing governing body or wherever we're going to land on that and whatever it's going to be called, we discussed the housing spectrum and were introduced to the concept of thinking about it as a wheel. And with the camping bylaw coming forward for some discussion tomorrow, it made me think back to the learnings from last time we discussed that. And that was that people are living in their vehicles, and this needs to be accounted for in some way in these housing issues. And as we were discussing the context of the governing body or whatever shape that's going to take, didn't seem like the place. But as that graphic jumped up again today, I'm wondering if this is a piece we need to work to further define or to see, or how staff is thinking of that in relation to the overall housing spectrum, or how we want to express that.
Mr. Mayor, I think that would certainly be on the, it would be part of the emergency housing, part of that wheel. I mean, it's certainly not a robust form of housing, but it's certainly in that portion of the housing spectrum sector.
I think that, and maybe a more fulsome discussion I'm assuming more fulsome discussion will come tomorrow and perhaps at other points in future, but I think it's worth highlighting whether that's, I don't think it's a uniquely Squamish situation, but I do think we have a higher usage of that housing form, and I think it's worth calling out on those on future graphics at minimum, but plans. I'll leave it there.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left. Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, thank you. I just, Mayor, given your comments, I wanted to try and clarify one of my earlier questions around data collection policy. And while it is relevant, I think, to open data, I see it as broader than just that. And it's directly tied to inclusion and systemic racism and understanding where those issues exist and how we are doing or not doing to address them. And so the resolution from New West is about asking the province and the feds to collect non-aggregated race and socioeconomic data so that we can make well-informed decisions. And so I'm wondering how, and my question earlier is an attempt to understand how we are viewing that sort of thing in terms of our rec programming and understanding some of these things. And my personal feeling is that this is important, but it also requires some really strong policy about how that data is handled and used and so on. And so trying to get a sense of what you would need from us or to think about that policy, or do we need to direct you for something in that relation?
I'm seeing some confusion or hesitation.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question is. Are you asking?
Well, I guess my sense is that, like the ask from New West to the feds in the province, I think municipally it makes sense to be tracking some of this sort of data to address issues of inclusion and equity and understand where there are gaps and to understand if we are making progress on those gaps. And so, I guess what I'm not understanding is how much of that we are already doing, and or what our policy gaps are around that sort of thing, and or what sort of policy we would need, and how do we get that policy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. That's much more clear. I appreciate that. As mentioned, our governance and data policy is underway right now and has been slowed somewhat. But that is definitely something that we're currently working on, and absolutely will include that and the importance of it. Kate is still on the line. Kate, I don't know if you have anything else to add other than that project is currently happening. So no, we don't need direction from council, and staff are very alive to this issue and will certainly take it into consideration and include Kate.
Yeah, I'm here. So yes, and I had a chance to skim the letter. In terms of disaggregation and use of third-party data, as we develop our governance process, it'll be actually about our data in terms of the data that we're actually collecting as a district and the process for which we use that data and the policy for use that data. And as a consideration, we'll also be looking at data that doesn't necessarily belong to us and how we employ and use that data. So, the idea of disaggregation and in order to understand and make decisions to help drive inclusion, if that is a strategic objective of our OCP and of council, we need to have supporting policy that enables us to do that, and because it's the right thing to do. However, all the considerations around privacy and so on need to be part of that consideration set in terms of collection and reporting of data. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Pangio?
Yeah, so it sounds like there might be some policy gaps, and we sort of maybe need to review what the OCP says and so on. And then at that point, it would be up to council to direct some work to fill in those policy gaps around the use or inclusion of that kind of disaggregated data.
I just want to stress that we're early on in the process around our governance and quality development. So right now, we've really completed, as per the presentation Linda provided, a roadmap on how we get there. And right now, we're doing some more, I would say, investigations or secondary research into what pieces of the puzzle we need to put together around governance and effective policy. The actual content of that policy is a step beyond where we are, for sure. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? I do want to put a motion on the floor for consideration by council, just to capture some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that I think we should be doing as a community. So I will try this out. I'll send you the wording, Shor. Whereas the District of Squamish OCP identifies 5 key goals to help us achieve our vision for 2040 and ensure we are focused on our social, economic, and environmental sustainability. And whereas several of these goals clearly identify the need to create a community where we work together, support the physical, emotional, and spiritual facets of wellness, ensure our most vulnerable citizens are cared for, and where people feel welcomed and genuinely included. And whereas the district is working towards implementation of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We have adopted the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People to guide its decolonization practices, and is an equal opportunity employer that welcomes all members of society. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the District of Squamish directs staff to bring back for consideration in the 2021 budget and 5-year financial plan a project to support these goals through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, with consideration of an internal organization plan based on best practices to support a diverse, inclusive, and equitable workforce, applying a social equity lens throughout the organization to support sound policy development and ensure that all residents can access, participate in, and benefit from the district's facilities, infrastructure, programs, and services, ensuring that the district's communication and engagement practices and processes are representative of the entire community, including how we develop committees and advisory bodies, and developing a plan to implement improvements and a way to measure progress on these goals. So that is my motion. I'm happy to repeat parts of it if people want. And for clarity, this is perhaps more than a one-year project, which is why I put the 2021 budget and 5-year financial plan, recognizing that systemic change doesn't take a year. But I would like us to try and lay the groundwork if that's possible to do. So is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor French. Are there any comments? Councillor Stoner?
I'd like to thank the mayor for bringing this forward and putting some thoughts down on the paper. This is a critical part to how we deliver service and we support our community. And we have taken steps in this direction, but I think it is critical that we continue to push the envelope on that and really ask ourselves how we continue to be equitable, inclusive, and diverse in the ways that we engage with our community in particular. And I think very commonly of our advisory boards and bodies that we strike, and often am a little bit very cognizant and aware that they don't often reflect necessarily a diversity in our community, and they aren't always built in a way that makes them accessible to a broader parts of our community. And so I think that this work is really important going forward. I look forward to engaging in it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Pettengill?
Yeah, I'd also like to thank the mayor for bringing this forward. I think we have talked about some of this in our work around COVID and our climate action plan. But, you know, in my mind, those two things are forcing us to make change, and whether we realize it or not, I think our lack of inclusion and equity sort of globally is also forcing us to make change. I think these things are much more interrelated than we sometimes talk about them as being as that. And so I think raising the profile of this, even though we have identified to some degree, is important to center this in what we are doing. And so I think this is really important to solving a lot of the challenges we face today, including climate and COVID. I think I see this all as one bundle. It all works together. Just one other piece, because boards and so on have been mentioned, and I just have to get a little personal governance thing in, where I believe when you are on a board or a governing body, your obligation is generally to represent everybody, not just a constituency. But having said that, if our boards and governing bodies don't look like the community, that shows there are gaps in inclusion, and so it demonstrates that there is work to do. And so I'm glad to see us prioritizing that, and I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pettengill. Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for your support, Council. I appreciate that. All right, it is 4:30-ish, so we should be wrapping up. but I will give council one last opportunity if there are any final questions on the operational strategic plan. Okay, I would like to thank staff for this update. I know the last 5 months have not been easy to balance our response to the pandemic, and also council constantly asking about progress on our strategic initiatives. So I think today really helped us see where the pivots have been possible, where there are some new opportunities that we didn't have at the beginning of this year. And we recognize that some things are at risk, and that's just reasonable given some of the setbacks we've had this year. But I also trust that where staff see the opportunities to accelerate some of those at-risk projects, we'll do that. So thank you to all of our staff who presented today. It was great to have so many different voices in the room, so to speak. I wish you were all here. But it was great to see everyone online. So thank you very much. So with that, motion to terminate, moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone.